Today we're getting into a new book for our daily devotions. We're getting into the book of Deuteronomy. And you might be thinking to yourself, like, why Deuteronomy? It was not one of the books that was suggested by you. So I'm very sorry. I offered that you could pick the book that we're going to study, and then I just picked something else. But we're actually studying Deuteronomy because I came across a verse in Deuteronomy that really struck me and made me think we really need to take the time to study this book. And so I want to spend today just giving you a little intro into Deuteronomy, and then I want to go through the first couple of verses. But I want to start with that verse that hit me so powerfully, and it's from Deuteronomy chapter 17. Now, Deuteronomy, he's talking about kind of exposing the whole law, and we'll talk about what that means. But he gets to the part about what the king is supposed to do. And here's what he says about the king of Israel. He says, when he takes the throne of his kingdom, he is to write for himself on a scroll a copy of this law, taken from that of the Levitical priests. It is to be with him, and he is to read it all the days of his life, so that he may learn to revere the Lord his God and follow carefully all the words of this law and these decrees, and not consider himself better than his fellow Israelites, and turn from the law to the right or to the left. Then he and his descendants will reign a long time over his kingdom in Israel. So essentially, God says, when you are the king, when you are in the position of the highest authority, the highest responsibility, you need to have the greatest amount of wisdom and understanding of, first of all, God's law, but then also the history of your nation, because that plays into who you are today. And so what I want you to do, king, is I want you to take the law, which would have been the Torah is another way we say this. It's the first 5 books of the Bible. So Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And he is supposed to hand copy the entire Torah, the entire law, and then he's supposed to take those 5 books, and he's supposed to read them again and again and again, and study them and study them and study them, because from studying them, he will understand how to govern the nation and how to be a wise leader, or essentially a father over the entire nation. Now, this is huge for a couple reasons. First of all, it's interesting that he is to copy it himself. I've been struck more and more as I think about note-taking and how we learn that we probably need to be writing more things down. We text so much, we type so much that we've forgotten how to actually take the time to slow handwrite out something. I know this when email started to come out. Email came out in my childhood, and I was just enthralled with it because I hated handwriting things, and I wasn't very good at it, and it took too long. And so I was just so excited that if I was ever going to write anybody a letter, I would type it up, and I would print it off, and I would sign my name at the bottom to make it sort of authentic, and then I would mail it off because I didn't really want to write things out handwritten. And I've kind of progressed from there and continued to be pretty obsessed with typing things down. I don't particularly like my own handwriting, to be honest with you. But here's what comes from being able to write things down is it forces you to slow down and think about every word slowly and write it out. And as you write it out, you're actually teaching yourself what those words say. It forces you to focus on every single word. You can't just skim through it, right? Like you can when you're reading it. You actually have to focus on each word because you have to write down each word. And then that he's supposed to take this copy that he hand wrote for himself, and he's supposed to study it every day of his reign as king. Now, that should teach us something about what is contained in these first 5 books of the Bible. Martin Luther actually was quoted as saying that the rest of the scriptures after the Torah, the first 5 books, is just divine commentary. Now, that obviously gives us some extra details, like we don't know who the person of Jesus Christ is until the New Testament, but like the prophecies about him and the pictures of him and the looking forward to him is already in these first 5 books of the Bible. The story of all Christianity is in the first 5 books of the Bible. And so if we can understand these first 5 books of the Bible, that's huge. So why do we study Deuteronomy? Well, Deuteronomy is Moses' exposition, his sermon, his explanation, divinely inspired, of the first 5 books of the Bible. So Deuteronomy is actually, and we'll read this in the first couple of verses, that Moses is taking the whole history of Israel, and he's saying, here's essentially what happened, and here's how I saw it, and I'm God's prophet, so I speak for God when I comment on how things were going and what we're supposed to know about these things. And as a leader, that's a really cool thing. I wish I kind of had that opportunity sometimes. You know, as a pastor, I think like I'm supposed to be constantly in tune with just about everything that's going on in our culture and our congregation and how those intersect. And I only get about half an hour to 40 minutes on a Sunday morning to preach at my people, besides these daily devotions. And so there are many times where I wish I just had more time to like explain everything like that I can see in a scriptural lens so that our people could understand that every single thing we're doing as a congregation or they're doing in their personal lives is impacted by the scriptures. But I don't have that chance. I don't get a whole book of the Bible like Moses did, and I suppose Moses was put into a more important position than I was for a reason. But the whole point is we're going to study this book of Deuteronomy because it's going to give us Moses' commentary on the first 5 books of the Bible, and it's going to explain to us the things that at least God thought were most important for a king of Israel to know if he was going to rule rightly. And so as we think about our relationship to our children or our spouses or our church or our neighbors, like these things will be so valuable for us as we recount what God taught through Moses in Deuteronomy. So that's where we're going. That's why we're going there. I'm going to the first 9 verses of the book, so you can follow along with me if you want. You can find the text in the description of the video or podcast unless you're on Facebook or Instagram, in which case you have to look it up yourself. So it says, "These are the words Moses spoke to all Israel in the wilderness east of the Jordan, that is in the Arabah, opposite Suph, between Paran and Tophel, Laban, Hazeroth and Dizahab. It takes 11 days to go from Horeb to Kadesh Barnea by the Mount Seir road. In the 40th year, on the first day of the 11th month, Moses proclaimed to the Israelites all that the Lord had commanded him concerning them. This was after he had defeated Sihon, king of the Amorites, who reigned in Heshbon, and at Edrei had defeated Og, king of Bashan, who reigned in Ashtaroth. East of the Jordan, in the territory of Moab, Moses began to expound this law, saying, 'The Lord our God said to us at Horeb, You have stayed long enough at this mountain. Break camp and advance into the hill country of the Amorites. Go to all the neighboring peoples in the Arabah, in the mountains, in the western foothills, in the Negev, and along the coast, to the land of the Canaanites and to Lebanon as far as the great river, the Euphrates. See, I've given you this land. Go in and take possession of the land the Lord swore he would give to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to their descendants after them.'" That's how far we're going today. So the first thing to notice, of course, is there are a lot of names and places that you probably don't know, and I don't honestly know either. So I want to give you a resource that can help you if you're going to really dig into this study, and this is pretty good for actually the rest of the Bible too. There is a website that I've really found helpful. It's called openbible.info. openbible.info. And that site has a couple things that are really valuable. It has a topical Bible, which I found really helpful. You can type in a topic, and it kind of is a crowdsourced list of verses that people think apply to that topic. And so, of course, it's not perfect pastoral advice all the time, but it can be helpful if you're thinking to yourself, like, what's a good thing for me to remember when I'm dealing with depression, or when I'm thinking about marriage, or I'm thinking about children, or I'm thinking about money, or whatever the thing is. You can type that topic in and it'll bring up some Bible verses for you. But another thing that it has in there that I found especially helpful is geocoding. So it has a resource where you can click on it and you can pick the chapter of the Bible that you're studying, and it will pull up a map, and on that map, it'll make pinpoints at all the places that are mentioned in that chapter of the Bible. So you can actually go on there, go to Deuteronomy 1, and it'll pull up a map, and it'll point to you where all the places are. And so if you want to, you can actually follow like the different places where Moses and the people are going or what they're talking about, so you can really get a geographic, historical view of these things. So basically what happens here in the first verses is Moses says, he starts talking, and he says, we're at this place, and it takes about 11 days to get from where we were to where we are now. But it actually took us 40 years. And so what Moses is doing is starting off this book kind of with a sarcastic jab. And the reason he's doing that is he's talking to the youngest generation of people who didn't go into the promised land, but survived as a result of the first time the Israelites tried to go into the promised land. So you remember this story? The Israelites try to get into the promised land, and they send in the spies, and they say, you know what, they're giants and we can't do it. And so God says, you know what, all the people over the age of 18 or 20, I believe it is, they're all going to die. But the youngest generation, you guys are going to grow up for 40 years, and then you get to go into the promised land. And that's these people. They're now in their 60s or 50s or whatever the case may be. And so Moses is saying, look, we had an 11-day journey, and your fathers, they were not willing to trust the Lord. And so we wandered around for 40 years. We've been doing this for a really long time, and so please listen to me when I say what God has to say, because that was the issue at the beginning. The people would not believe what God had to say. It wasn't that they were not strong enough or not doing the right things. It was that they didn't believe that God said, this is your land. So he names all the places, and then he says, The Lord said to us at Horeb, this is verse 6, "You've stayed long enough in this mountain, break camp and advance into the hill country." And then he basically lays out the outline of the promised land where he's going to give to the nation of Israel. And he says, "See, I have given you this land. Go in and take possession of the land the Lord swore he would give to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to their descendants after them." And so the big thing for here to remember is kind of the big narrative of the scriptures. God's narrative is always, I save you, I give to you, and then I ask from you. Most people like to think that our relationship with God is, I do for God and then God does for me. I'm good to him and he is good to me. I'm faithful to him and then he's faithful to me. And the Bible says actually the exact opposite. God brought the nation of Israel out of slavery in Egypt and then he gave them the law. He brought them into the promised land and then he gave them the law. It is always a case of God giving to us and then asking us to be faithful to the promises he's given to us. He sent us Jesus. Jesus died on the cross, and then he said, believe in him. I've already done this for you. And so the big takeaway for us today as we start Deuteronomy is to remember that this is always going to be a story of God's faithfulness and him reminding us of his faithfulness and our response being faith in that faithfulness. Not being good people, although that's important, not being faithful to him, although that's important, but simply saying, he said it, we believe it, that's good enough for us, we're going to go on that. So that's as far as we're going to go today as we intro Deuteronomy. I'm looking forward to studying this book with you, and I hope you are as well. Make sure you share and like and subscribe to all of our content so you can see some other things that we're doing.